Raising Unicorns!
Harmon Brothers!
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Raising Unicorns. I'm joined today by the one, the only, Ryan Todd Powell.
There's a lot of us out there, actually. I Googled it.
Okay, the one and only that works at Harmon Brothers.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for a book throwdown!
So today on the podcast, we are reviewing How to Get Ideas, this book by Jack Foster. It's not that huge of a book. It's actually pretty short, but I would say it's incredibly dense. And what it does is it's basically a set of like tips and principles of how to train your mind to come up with new ideas more naturally and easier and do it almost subconsciously. And also just like teaches you how to get in touch with like your inner child, if you will, because kids, if you have kids, they're just like wells of creativity because they don't have any constraints on their mind. They just like come up with the most random crap. And most of it is just crap, but a lot of it is amazing. And like that, I think that's like something he talks about. So it's really fascinating. But yeah, it's a really interesting book that basically kind of covers how to do that on every aspect of creativity throughout your entire life.
Yeah.
I really like the idea that like ideas are inherently destructive because it usually comes back and supplants or destroys an old system or an old thought.
And you can see that a lot, especially today with like Tesla, for example. Like, there's electric cars now, and
they're so fast.
And they're really fun.
But a lot of people are very resistant to it,
yeah.
And like because it takes a tremendous amount of energy, but now like ultimately you're going to be in a better spot.
Yeah.
When there's a transition to it. Plus, then you have like plaid mode and fart buttons that like make sound like you make the car fart. One thing that I wanted to talk about with you, Ryan, that I thought rang so true to our experience at Harmon Brothers is I can't remember where the reference was in the book, but he basically said like there's this old school management tactic of like teams of accomplishing tasks are like 8 to 10 people with like a manager at the head of it, and he's like, I do not have that experience. My experience is that it's 2 to 3 people coming together and ideating, and I cannot count the number of times where even you and I specifically have been like just spitballing stuff, or other like you and Sean's and Brennan, like you guys are like 2 peas in a pod. I don't know what it is about the chemistry of like 2 to 3 creatives in a room, like just like brainstorming something or problem solving something that like genuinely feels like a magical number. Because I even feel like sometimes at our retreats, like it's hard with 4 people and a creative director to get stuff done. So oftentimes we'll break into 2 little pods of 2 and 3 to go focus on specific tasks within the script itself.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I love working with, 1 or 2 other people. And I've told this to Sean, because Sean's like one of my main collaborators, right? I think it like, to me, it reminds me of like how a Jacob's ladder works. Like, you can't have the 2, like the electrons jumping back and forth with just 1 wire. You've got the 2 wires, electricity's going back and forth, and it rises to the top. And that makes me think of kind of like our ideas. I'm like, what if this? Bounce it over to him. He goes, oh yeah. And what if you did this with that? Boom. And it just bounces back and forth until we like get to the solution.
Yes. I know what a Jacob's ladder is.
It's the thing with the wires that it goes zzz, zzz.
Now I know what you're talking about. You're talking about the 2 antenna?
Yeah.
And it goes like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's always in science fiction movies where it's like, or like an old school, like mad scientist.
Yeah.
Now I am educated. Yeah. No, and I've been like around Ryan and Sean when they're like on a jam session, and like whether it's at a writing retreat or a post-writing retreat where they're working on an idea. And it is like, there's a really good chemistry with that size of group, like 2 to 3 people, where it just like, you can spitball and have fun and energy. Like you can almost feel the energy like building in the room as you're like having good ideas, and it helps like open up your brain to like other ideas. And this leads to another principle that he talks about in the book is like in that 2 or 3 people, like it's really important that you're both comfortable failing in front of each other. Like, and he says like that's really hard when one of them is your boss or a supervisor, because like unless your supervisor or boss is willing to make what he says make a total ass of his or herself, like it's not going to work.
Yeah.
And I think that's something we try really hard culturally not to shut down ideas, because oftentimes like a bad idea that's thrown out there, even if it's like outrageous, like there's no way we could do it, bad ideas will spur good ideas that we can do and that are like really solid.
Yeah, no, that's like one of my favorite parts of the book. It's like, Don't be afraid to shout out ideas. There's more than one solution. And the more ideas you come up with, the more good ideas you're going to have. It's like you hear a lot, especially with writers, like your first draft of something is going to be garbage, and just to get it out there. And I think that's true, but I like to look at it a different way. I think it was Jordan Peele who said, like, he kind of looks at it as if it's a sandbox and you're just trying to fill that box with sand so that you can make your sand castle out of all that sand. And that sand that you're pouring in is all the ideas. You don't care how good or bad they are. You're just pouring them in. And then you can sculpt something. You can shape something really like your masterpiece, right?
Yeah, but if you don't fill a sandbox with sand, you literally can't build a castle no matter what.
Yeah, because you're not going to just pluck the most brilliant, all like fully fleshed out idea just out of thin air.
Yeah,
Probably.
It's got to have a good foundation with lots of bad ideas at the base of it.
Yeah, you need fuel. You need fuel, right?
Yeah.
So that's to me, that's what those ideas are. It's like, let's just throw them out. Let's play What If. That's another game that Jack Foster says is like they played at their agency. It's like, what if this happened, or what if you did this? What if this? And you're just asking questions, you know?
Yeah.
And you're not saying we should do this.
Yeah.
We should do this thing. This idea is good. It's just like, what if this? What if this? And you're just very curious, and you're asking all these questions, and you're becoming, you're trying to be you're trying to like let your walls come down. Be more like a child, He also references that. That's a section in the chapter in the book. Just like be really curious. Just let go. Just wander around.
And I think that's like a big thing that is tough for people to do. That's my opinion on this is like throughout the whole book and all of the barriers of being creative. I feel like this is often the biggest barrier is people don't want to feel stupid.
Yeah.
And people don't want to take. Because I mean, saying an idea is somewhat of you're putting yourself out there. You're putting your idea in some ways you feel like represents you, your intellect, or your creativity.
Yeah.
And I feel like that oftentimes prevents people from getting ideas. And like we mess around a ton in the office, and we give each other a ton of crap, and we rip each other pretty hard.
Yeah.
Like, when Nikki got hired here, she's one of our she's our lead editor here at Harmon Brothers. She was like, "Do you guys like each other?" I was like, "Yeah, dude, like we love each other." She's like, "Oh, because you guys are like really mean." But it's funny because we get in a writer's room, it's never like, "Hey Ryan, that's a really crappy idea." You know what I mean? Like I feel like I don't know. I've never heard you or Sean or Kellen or Kelly or Shay. It never. If a joke falls flat, it's like you just like it's like, oh, okay, cool. What else we got? It's never like let's dwell on it or let's make them feel bad, because that's like the worst thing for creativity in a writer's room for sure. Is like because then you shut down and then you're hesitant to share answers or just share ideas.
Yeah, and that's one thing. Like I know Sean has vocalized this to me in the past. He's like a lot of times I don't quite get what you're saying when you present an idea to me, but I try to trust you because I know something good could come out of it. I'm like, thanks, man.
He's like, I don't understand what the freak you're saying, but I'm gonna guess there's something good in there. One of my favorite stories that he has in here, partly because it's like, did they really do that? It's this telephone company that was training operators, and they had this really great training procedure, which made them the best operators in the country by a long shot, right? But then what they realized is they were having all these amazing operators who were getting recruited by the government or competing telephone companies, and it was driving the executive team nuts. And they're like, well, let's just pay him more money. And so they paid him more money, and they would like send their spouse like flowers like periodically and like doing all these perks. And no matter what they did, they just kept losing all their really great employees that they had trained because the competition would just pay them more. And that's like kind of paying more is more what he calls a think vertically decision. And he says, you need to think laterally. And so they had this like conversation in the boardroom where it's like, how do we stop all of our great operators? This is what 1940s, I imagine. I don't know when this was. Operators, when were they still around? 60s, 50s? I don't know.
It's a great question.
We'll say it's the 50s.
I'm so young.
I'm so young. What's a DVD?
You sound like my grandma.
But like they were like, oh, how do we stop losing these operators? That's how they talked then. And they were like, yeah, I just want to chop their legs off so they can't leave to a different job. And like
someone's like, wait a second.
We really should do that.
What an idea.
And they this is like a true story, apparently. They literally hired like amputees or people that like were born without like lower half, like, and built their entire company around it, where they had like all these ramps, they had these special accommodations, they had all the systems that were like set up for them so it would work perfectly for these people who like were paraplegic or amputees. And they hired them, and it stopped their competition from doing that because they're like, well, we don't want to change our entire infrastructure just for this one move.
Yeah.
And they kept on to all their talent. I don't know if that would work today. Like, I feel like there's maybe something problematic about that story. I can't articulate what it is.
but it is a good example in that it gets the idea across. It's like, instead of trying to one up your competition in traditional ways, just try to attack the problem from a completely different angle.
Yeah.
Very unexpected angles.
Yes.
There's a lot of other approaches. They're not as obvious.
Yeah. And in many ways, it was, he talks about this later on in the book, is like trying to solve for a different problem than the most obvious one.
Yes.
And like being like, oh, if we solve a different problem, it actually creates the outcome that we want, but it wasn't the problem we were originally trying to solve.
Yeah. You've got to ask different questions.
Yeah. Because he had a really great quote in here, from Einstein. He says, the formulation of the problem is often more essential than its solution or outcome, which I thought was such an interesting thing, is like asking the right question often can be the thing that can reframe it in your mind for good ideas and good solutions to be brought about.
And that kind of leads into what I believe is the final chapter, or like one of the last chapters of the book, which is like, if you have a good idea, do something about it.
Yeah.
Which it's like so true. Like, I like to attempt screenwriting on the side, right?
Don't let him be modest, guys.
But I'll talk to a lot of
screenwriter.
Well, maybe someday. But I'll talk to like a lot of people. They're like, and mention that in conversation, or they know that about me, and they're like, "Oh, that's so cool! Yeah, I love like coming up with like movie ideas. I think that's so fun." I'm like, and they start, questioning me about it. I'm like, "Oh, have you like written anything?" No, it's like too much work. I kid you not. Like that happens all the time. I'm like,
who's got the time?
Yeah. But Jack Foster talks about like, if, there's a lot of people that will get a good idea and then they'll tell someone about it and they'll be like, that's a great idea. And then the person with the idea will feel all warm and fuzzy and they'll be glowing, and then they won't do anything about it. And it's like, well, what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
And I've been guilty of that. I think everybody has at one point or another. So I'm trying to do a lot better at that. So like he offers a bunch of solutions, and I've been applying some of those, and they really do help. So it's like one of his suggestions is when you get a good idea and you want to make first, don't hesitate. Just like jump in while you're like still really while it's hot, while your
energy is high.
Yeah, and you're really enthusiastic about it. And then another thing is put some money towards it, right? Because you're not going to be that enthusiastic for the whole process. You're going to have to be disciplined. And how can you be disciplined with it? And then one of those things that he suggests is put some money towards it. So like,
because you're investing in the idea.
So for me, like I'd come up with this screenplay idea a couple years ago, and I've been working on it off and on for a while. And then I hit kind of a rut, and I was like, oh, I need to break out of this rut. And, I heard about a class with a screenwriter, like a pretty successful producer screenwriter in Hollywood. And I joined that class, and it costs some money. It's like, okay, I'm paying, $750 or something for this class to help me take this or get this or not produced necessarily, but written. And if I'm paying that much money, it's a lot more likely that I'm going to spend the amount of time that's necessary in order to get it done, instead of just being like, oh, I had this great idea, so fun, worked at it for a little while, and then gave up, which I've done a lot.
Yeah.
So like that's a really great suggestion. That's helped me a lot. And I've done that a couple times now with this one idea.
Specific script.
With this specific script. Yeah.
Well, I feel like that like, again, this goes beyond just, this is like a really solid principle in general if you want to stick with something. I mean, that was like the difference between like Ryan goes to a gym. He's been going to a gym for a long time. And I was like, I wanted to be, obviously he's jacked. You should see him shirtless. Meow. But like I feel like I always like wanted to, and I signed up for like one of the like Gold's gyms that were like $10 a month, and I was like, I'd go like once a week, and then I'd like not go. But then I signed up for a gym that was like an actual like $100+ a month gym, And it's like, it's the same thing. Like when you have emotional, like, and actual capital put into it, like real money, that's like a loss that is painful that motivates you to go do something.
Yeah. And
So-
for the record, that gym that you pay that much money for isn't just like they give you a lot more also.
Oh, for sure.
So-
For sure. There's a lot more that goes along with it. But it is also one of those things I mentally cannot stand when I miss like 2 weeks and I'm like,
Yeah.
well, that was a waste of $50,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
like, or more. And so, but it is the same way with it. So I think it applies to a lot of things, like invest in the things, the ideas that you have, or like the goals that you want to accomplish. Right.
Absolutely.
Well, cool, man. Thanks so much for being on the podcast today.
Yeah. Thanks so much for paying me so much money to be here.
Oh, you're welcome. He gets very handsomely rewarded with,
Handsome reward for a handsome man.
we pay him in baby food to humiliate him.
Joke's on him. I love carrots. When they're the softer, the better.
And on that note, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Raising Unicorns, guys.
Thank you for watching Raising Unicorns!
Subscribe now.